The first time anyone saw him in the diner, they thought he was just another night owl hiding from his own thoughts and the rain. Nobody guessed that the man sitting alone in the corner booth, tracing circles on a paper cup, was a king who had buried his own crown to keep the world safe from him. He chose that booth because it was far from the windows and close to the humming coffee machine, where the warmth almost felt like sunlight without the pain. The fluorescent lights were soft here, dimmed by years of grease and steam, and the air smelled of coffee, cheap fries, and something he could never taste but had grown to love, the faint, clumsy comfort of human life. His long, pale fingers rested beside a half-eaten burger he didn't need, his eyes following the steam curling from it as if it were a memory trying to take shape. He called himself Adrian now. The name felt borrowed, like the worn navy coat on his shoulders, but it was easier than the ancient one he had carried for centuries. Once his court had bowed when he entered a room. Now a flickering neon "open" sign buzzed above his head, and a fly circled lazily near the ketchup bottles. In a strange way, he preferred this. It was quieter. Nobody screamed or begged. No one looked at him with fear. They barely looked at him at all, except her. Lena pushed through the kitchen door, balancing 2 plates on her arm and nudging it open with her hip. Her ponytail was messy from the dinner rush, her cheeks flushed, and there was a small streak of mayonnaise near her wrist she hadn't noticed. She should have blended into the blur of customers and orders, one more tired human in a tired little diner. But for him, from the first moment he saw her weeks ago, she was the single bright color in a world that had turned to gray. He watched as she joked with a family in the next booth, sliding fries closer to a sleepy child, refilling their sodas without being asked. She laughed softly when the little boy insisted he wasn't tired, even as his eyes drooped. There was nothing extraordinary about her in the way humans usually meant that word. She had no magic, no power, no crown. Yet every movement she made carried a gentle kind of courage, the kind that simply kept going even when nobody applauded. "Refill?" she asked suddenly at his table. He hadn't heard her approach. Centuries of practice, and she still managed to surprise him. He blinked once, forcing his gaze away from the window where rain smeared the city lights into slow rivers of color. "Yes," he said, his voice low, carefully softened. "Please." She smiled, and it was disarming in a way that battlefields had never been. "You always sit in this exact spot, you know that?" She tilted her head as she poured coffee into his cup. "I think the booth might start missing you if you ever change tables." He looked down at the steaming liquid. He would not drink it. He couldn't. But he had learned to enjoy the warmth of the cup in his hands, the way it made him feel like he belonged to the world of living, breathing things. "Creatures of habit," he murmured, almost to himself. "We all are." "Yeah," she replied with a little shrug. "Some of us just have nowhere else to go at midnight." There it was, another small truth wrapped in a half-joke. He studied her face, the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her smile wavered at the edges when she thought no one was looking. His hearing caught a tiny flutter in her chest, a heartbeat that sped up whenever she checked her phone and found it blank. Loneliness had a sound, and he knew it well. "You work every night," he said quietly. "Aren't you ever tired?" She laughed, but it was thinner this time. "Of course I am, but rent doesn't care if I'm tired, and my little brother still likes hot meals," so she lifted one shoulder, pretending it was nothing. "Besides, you'd miss me, right? Who else is going to bring you coffee you don't drink?" Her words landed like a small stone dropped into a deep, still lake inside him. The truth, the dangerous, impossible truth, was that he would miss her. He should not. He was not meant to grow attached. Not again. He had left his throne, hidden his crown beneath earth older than any human language, for one reason, to stop hurting people just by existing. Distance was his last remaining act of kindness to the world. But Lena kept walking into that distance, tray in hand, smile offered freely. The memory came unbidden, as it always did when he let himself feel too much. Pennsylvania, 1974. A small town near the mountains, the church with its white steeple. His soldiers awaiting orders. "Make sure the message is clear," he had said. Just 5 words. 5 words that became 73 graves. He hadn't stayed to watch, hadn't seen the faces, hadn't heard the screams. He'd sat on his throne and told himself that was mercy, that a king's hands could stay clean if he simply looked away. 3 days later, his general returned with the count. 73. Men, women, children. Thorough, the general had called it. And Adrian had felt nothing. The crown on his head had numbed him so completely that 73 lives were just numbers in a report. That night he took off the crown and finally understood what he had become. "Hey," Lena's voice pulled him back. "You okay? You went somewhere else for a second there." "Just tired," he said. "Long night." Before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Cold air slipped in, threading around their ankles. Adrian's body reacted before his thoughts caught up. Every sense sharpened, the world narrowing down to that doorway. A man entered, dressed in a dark suit that seemed too clean, too precise for this street. His hair was neatly combed back, his shoes barely wet despite the puddles outside. To anyone else, he looked like another tired businessman, but Adrian smelled it immediately. Stone, damp earth. A faint metallic sweetness, older than the city itself. Not human. The stranger's gaze swept the diner, casual but too focused, weighing every face. When his eyes paused, just for a fraction of a heartbeat, on Adrian's booth, a chill went through Adrian's spine. Recognition glimmered there, buried under practiced indifference. Lena didn't notice. She straightened with a tired but automatic smile and headed for the new arrival, order pad in hand. "Good evening. Table for one?" The stranger smiled politely, but his eyes were cold in a way only someone like Adrian would see. "Yes," he said. His voice held an old cadence, like someone who had worked very hard to fit into a language that was not his first. "Anywhere is fine." Lena led him to a table not far from Adrian's, placing a menu in front of him. "Kitchen's a little backed up," she warned kindly, "but I'll make sure you don't starve." The man's lips curved, but there was no warmth in it. "I doubt anything here would." Adrian's fingers tightened on the ceramic mug just enough to cause a faint crack in the glaze. He forced himself to breathe slowly. This room was full of fragile, breakable lives. Any move he made had to protect them first, even if that meant stepping directly into danger himself. When Lena disappeared through the kitchen door, the stranger spoke without looking up from his menu. "You're far from home, Your Majesty." The words were so soft no human ear could have caught them across the distance of 2 tables, but Adrian heard every syllable as clearly as if they had been whispered into his ear. The title dropped into the quiet hum of his mind like a stone through glass. He didn't look up right away. Millennia of politics had taught him the value of stillness. "You are mistaken," he replied just as quietly, his tone flat. "You have the wrong man." The stranger, Marcus, Adrian's memory supplied from deeper recognition, chuckled under his breath. "Do I? The court searched for you across 3 continents. Half a century of stories about a pale man who never ate, who moved from place to place, always at night." He paused. "I admit I expected something more dramatic. A diner is a humble throne." Adrian let his expression stay bored, almost tired. Inside, every part of him was calculating. If Marcus was here, then others might be close. Scouts, agents, old loyalties in fresh skin. "I left the throne," Adrian said. "It no longer concerns me." "Ah," Marcus stirred his coffee with a small, unnecessary motion. "But you concern it. A kingdom cannot forget its king, no matter how far he runs." He looked up then, meeting Adrian's eyes directly. "The new ruler requires the crown. You have 3 nights to retrieve it and present yourself at the old cathedral ruins. After that, we stop asking politely." "And if I refuse?" Marcus's smile turned colder. Then we remind you why kings don't get to simply walk away. His gaze flicked to where Lena had disappeared. She's important to you, I can see it. How unfortunate for her. Every muscle in Adrian's body went rigid. Leave them out of this. Everything is part of our world, Marcus answered. That is what you taught us once. Remember when you commanded us to watch every alley, every shadow, every human who spoke your name? He tilted his head. And now you sit here pretending to be one of them. It would be almost funny if it were not so tragic. Before Adrian could respond, the lights flickered, once, twice, then died completely. The diner plunged into darkness. Gasps scattered around the room, the clatter of a dropped fork, a chair scraping against tile. But to Adrian, the darkness was home. His vision cleared instantly, sharper than in daylight. He saw every outline, every face frozen in surprise. He saw Lena's hand reach blindly for a table edge, searching for balance. On instinct, he moved faster than any human eye could properly track, his hand finding hers before she could fall. His skin was ice cold even through the warmth of her wrist. She froze, her breath catching. In the dim glow of the emergency sign, their eyes met. "Whoa," she whispered. "You're quick." The lights blinked back on, humming softly. Conversations resumed in broken pieces. Nervous laughs scattered around the room. Adrian realized with a quiet jolt that he was still holding her hand. For him, her warmth was almost unbearable, like stepping too close to a fire he had no right to touch. He let go at once, folding his hands neatly in front of him. "Reflex," he said, trying to sound casual, human. "Old habit." She flexed her fingers as if testing whether they really belonged to her. That little line appeared between her brows, the one that showed when she was thinking too hard about something. "Well, thanks. You always seem so calm, like nothing surprises you." "Very little does," he answered before he could stop himself. Then he softened his tone. "But you'd be surprised how much can still matter." Something in his words made her pause. The diner noise faded a little around them, as if someone had turned down an invisible dial. Her eyes searched his face with strange intensity, like she was trying to see past his coat, past his calm, down to whatever he kept buried there. "You talk like you've lived 100 lives," she said softly. He smiled faintly, an echo of something older and sadder. "Sometimes it feels like I have." The moment stretched between them, fragile and dangerous. And then Lena's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out, and her expression changed immediately, all the color draining from her face. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked. "It's Max, my brother." Her voice trembled slightly. "He says someone's been following him, that he's scared to come home." Adrian's blood ran cold. "When did he send this?" 2 minutes ago." She was already moving, pulling off her apron. "I need to go, I need to—" The back door of the diner slammed open. Max stumbled through, 16 years old, and trying not to look terrified. His hoodie was torn at the shoulder, and there was a fresh bruise blooming on his cheek. Behind him, 2 figures emerged from the rainy darkness. A woman, tall and predatory, with dark hair pulled back severe. A man, broad-shouldered and cold-eyed. Both moved with the same unnatural grace that Marcus possessed. "Max!" Lena ran to her brother, pulling him behind her. The woman, Seraphine, Adrian recognized her from decades past, smiled without warmth. "Don't worry, we didn't hurt him. Much." Her eyes found Adrian across the diner. "We just wanted to make sure you understood the stakes, Your Majesty." The male hunter, Victor, cracked his knuckles. 3 nights. That's generous, considering how long you've been hiding." Adrian stood slowly. The air around him seemed to thicken, pressure building like a storm gathering strength. Several customers looked up, feeling something they couldn't name, an instinctive unease that made them want to leave. "You will not touch them," Adrian said, and his voice carried something ancient and terrible beneath its surface, not loud, not threatening, simply absolute. Seraphine's smile faltered. Victor took an involuntary step back. "There's the king we remember," Marcus said from his table, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate calm. "We'll be waiting at the cathedral. Don't disappoint us again." The three hunters turned and left as quickly as they'd come, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. The diner was silent. Everyone had felt it, that moment of pressure, of power barely contained. Lena stood frozen, holding Max, staring at Adrian with wide eyes. "What are you?" she whispered. Adrian looked at her, at the fear and confusion and stubborn courage all warring in her expression, at Max, bruised and shaking but safe, at the normal, ordinary diner that had become his sanctuary, now shattered by the past he'd thought he could escape. "A monster," he said quietly, trying very hard to be a man. Before either of them could respond, a new voice spoke from the doorway. "Hello, brother." Adrian's entire body went rigid. He knew that voice, knew it like he knew his own, because once, a lifetime ago, it had called him by a name he'd almost forgotten. A young woman stepped out of the shadows. She looked no more than 25, with auburn hair and eyes that held the same ancient quality as Adrian's own. She was beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful, all sharp edges and dangerous grace. "Liana," Adrian breathed, and the name came out like a prayer and a curse tangled together. "You're dead. I saw you die." She smiled, and it was the saddest, cruelest thing he'd ever seen. "You saw me almost die. There's a difference." She stepped further into the light, and Lena could see now what Adrian saw, the inhuman stillness, the way she didn't quite seem to breathe. "In your war, in that Pennsylvania town. You remember, don't you? 73 dead. I was supposed to be number 74. "Liana, you left me there." Her voice was soft, conversational, more terrible than any scream. "I was 18 years old, your baby sister, and I begged you to stop the attack. You said you couldn't, that a king had to make hard choices." She moved closer, circling him like a wolf. "So I watched our soldiers burn that town. I tried to save a child from the flames. The building collapsed on both of us. And while I lay there dying, you were already gone, already back to your throne." Adrian's face had gone ashen. "A vampire found you." "A vampire gave me a choice," Liana corrected. "Die as a human, or live as what you'd become. So I chose," she gestured at herself. 150 years I've been alive. 150 years I've been waiting for this moment, for you to care about something again, for you to have something to lose." Her eyes shifted to Lena and Max. "And now you do." Before anyone could react, Liana moved with impossible speed. One moment she was across the room. The next, she had Max by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand. The boy struggled, gasping, his feet kicking uselessly. "No!" Lena screamed. Adrian surged forward, but Victor and Seraphine were suddenly there, blocking his path. Not fighting, just standing between him and his sister. A wall of old loyalty that remembered when Liana had been human, when she'd been innocent, when she deserved better than what her brother's choices had given her. "Here are your new terms," Liana said, her voice perfectly calm, despite holding a struggling teenager in the air. "You have until tomorrow night, midnight. Bring the crown to the cathedral ruins. Come alone. If you do, I'll let the boy live. If you don't—" She tightened her grip slightly, and Max made a choking sound. "Well, you know how this works. You wrote the playbook." She released him, letting him fall gasping to the floor. Lena rushed to him, pulling him into her arms. Liana looked at Adrian one last time. "I spent 150 years learning how to hurt the way you hurt me, how to break what you love the way you broke everything I loved." Her smile was gentle, almost kind. "Tomorrow night, brother. Don't be late. I'd hate to kill them without you there to watch." Then she was gone, dissolving into shadow and mist like she'd never been there at all. Victor and Seraphine followed, leaving only Marcus, who stood and straightened his suit. "The cathedral," he said. "Midnight tomorrow. Just you, the crown, and your conscience." He glanced at Lena and Max. "For their sake, I hope your conscience loses." He left. The bell above the door chimed cheerfully, absurdly normal, Adrian stood in the center of the diner, surrounded by frightened humans who were only now starting to understand they'd witnessed something they had no context for, no language to describe. Lena looked up at him from where she knelt with Max. Her eyes held 1,000 questions. But the only one that mattered was the one she asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Who were you? And Adrian, who had been a king, who had buried his crown, who had spent 50 years trying to become anything other than what he was, had no answer that wouldn't damn him further. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and somewhere to the north, in ruins older than regret, a crown waited in darkness to be claimed. The back room of the Nightfall diner smelled of cardboard and old grease. Claire stood with arms crossed, not defensively, but holding herself together against something unraveling between them. Owen sat on an overturned crate, hand pressed against the bruise on his shoulder where the hunter had grabbed him. Caspian stood near the door, keeping distance, like a habit he couldn't break. His fingers brushed the pocket of his coat. The pendant he'd carried for half a century felt heavier tonight than it ever had. You said they were looking for a king, Claire said quietly, voice careful, controlled. You meant you. He nodded once. And you're... She searched for words that wouldn't sound absurd in a room lit by a flickering bulb. You're not human. No, I haven't been for 270 years. The number hung between them. Owen looked up sharply. Claire's fingers tightened against her arms. Vampire, she said, not a question. Yes. And a king. Caspian's jaw tightened. I was. I walked away 50 years ago, and I've spent every day since trying to put enough distance between myself and what I'd become. He paused. It wasn't enough. Claire studied him with eyes that had always seen more than he wanted. Why did you walk away? The question he'd been avoiding in the safe rituals of coffee and late-night conversations. Caspian closed his eyes, and when he opened them, the careful mask cracked just enough to let old grief show through. Because I looked at my kingdom and realized I'd built it on fear and blood, he said. The crown I wore wasn't just symbolic. For vampire royalty, it becomes real power. When I wore it, I could feel every one of my kind within 1,000 miles. Command them, compel them, break their will with a thought. That sounds like power, Owen said quietly. It was. The kind that makes you forget what it feels like to ask instead of command. His reflection in the dirty window looked older than it should. I told myself I was keeping order, protecting my people, and for a while, maybe that was true. What changed? Claire asked. Caspian was quiet for a long moment. There was a town in Pennsylvania. We'd received reports of vampire rebels hiding there. My advisors urged swift action. My generals wanted to make an example. He could still see it. The church's white steeple, houses clustered together. I went myself, wore the crown, brought 50 soldiers. We found 3 rebels hiding in the church basement. The room went very quiet. My general asked what to do with the town, the humans who'd given shelter. They needed to understand the cost of defiance, he said. Caspian's voice went flat. I told him to do what was necessary, to make sure the message was clear. Claire's breath caught. I didn't stay to watch. I told myself that was mercy. He laughed without humor. I went back to my fortress, sat on my throne, told myself I'd done what a king had to do. How many? Owen whispered. Caspian turned to face them. 73. Men, women, children. The rebels had been hiding among them, so everyone who might have known, he couldn't finish. The weight of that number filled the small room. I didn't know the exact count until 3 days later. My general returned and gave his report. Proud, efficient. And I sat there with the crown on my head and realized I couldn't feel anything. The power had numbed me to the point where 73 lives were just numbers in a report. He moved to the wall, leaned against it. That night I took off the crown. I walked through my fortress and saw how people looked at me, not with respect, with fear. The kind that kills love, kills loyalty, kills everything human. His voice cracked slightly. I'd spent centuries building a kingdom where I stood alone at the top, and I finally understood that alone was all I'd ever be. So you buried it, Claire said softly. Beneath an old cathedral, sealed with blood magic only I could open. I told my court I was abdicating. Caspian's smile was bitter. They thought I was weak. My steward, Dorian, he was the only one who tried to understand. But even he... A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. Dorian in the throne room, face twisted with disbelief. "You're leaving us with this chaos? After everything we built together?" "I'm freeing you from a tyrant," Caspian had replied. "You're abandoning your responsibility," Dorian had said, "and one day you'll regret it." Caspian shook his head, returning to the present. "I couldn't wear that crown again. Wouldn't let myself become that thing that could order deaths and feel nothing." Owen stood slowly. "But you're not like that now. You saved me. You're kind to Claire. You're not a monster." "Aren't I?" Caspian met the boy's eyes. "The capacity for what I did, it's still in me. That's why I stay away from people, why I never let myself care too much." His gaze shifted to Claire. Or at least, that was the plan. The silence that followed was heavier with understanding. "They want you to take it back," Claire said. "Yes." "And if you do?" "Then I become that king again. And this time, knowing what I know," he shook his head, "I don't know if I could ever take it off." The back door slammed open. Aldrich stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. Behind him, a woman emerged, tall, dark hair pulled back severe, eyes ancient and cold. Seraphine. She moved with predatory grace, and in her grip, struggling uselessly, was Owen. No, Caspian's enhanced vision caught it instantly. Same face, wrong heartbeat. An illusion. "Clever trick, Aldrich," Caspian said, voice dropping into something dangerous. "But I can smell the difference." The false Owen dissolved. Seraphine smiled without warmth. "But the real boy isn't here, is he?" Her voice was cultured, European, centuries old. "Check your waitress's phone, Your Majesty." Claire's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. Her face went white. "What does it say?" Caspian asked. "A photo. Owen, tied up somewhere dark. The message says, 'Cathedral ruins. Tomorrow midnight. Bring the crown or we send pieces.'" The temperature dropped. Caspian's eyes blazed. "You dare." "We dare what we must," Seraphine interrupted. "Dorian requires the crown. You will retrieve it and bring it to the old cathedral by midnight tomorrow, alone." Her eyes flicked to Claire with casual cruelty. "Or the boy dies slowly, and we move on to the girl. I've had centuries to get creative with pain, Caspian. You taught me well." That landed like a blow. Seraphine had been one of his enforcers once, one of the ones who'd carried out his orders without question. Caspian moved faster than human eyes could follow, but Seraphine held up a small vial of dark liquid. "Owen's blood. Fresh. One word from me, he feels every agony I've perfected since you abandoned us." Her expression was cold stone. "I followed your orders for 200 years. I helped you build that kingdom of fear. And when you walked away, you left us to pick up the pieces." Something flickered in her eyes, not quite betrayal, but close. Dorian at least had the courage to stay, to try to hold things together while you played human in your pathetic diners. "Seraphine, tomorrow, midnight, cathedral ruins, the crown, or I'll show you exactly what you taught me about breaking things." She dissolved into shadow, Aldrich following. The door swung shut on empty air. Claire collapsed against the wall. "We have to—" "No human authority can help," Caspian said quietly. "This is vampire business, old business." "Then what do we do?" Her voice broke. "Owen is 16. He's just a kid." "I know." Caspian crossed to her, moving slowly, carefully. "Claire, look at me." She did, tears streaming. "I will get him back, whatever it takes. Your brother will be safe." "How? If you give them the crown, then Dorian becomes what I was, possibly worse." Caspian's expression was grim. "He believed I was too soft, even at my worst. If he gets the crown, He trailed off. But if I don't, Owen dies. The impossible choice sat between them like a chasm. There might be another way, Caspian said slowly. The crown can be destroyed. If someone confronts what it represents and chooses to let it go, he stopped, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. The only one who could try is me, and I don't trust myself near it. Then I'm coming with you, Claire said firmly. Absolutely not. You think I can just wait here? Anger broke through her fear. Owen is my responsibility. If you're facing this, I'm going with you. Caspian searched her face and saw the same stubborn courage that had drawn him from the first night. All right, he said finally, but we do this carefully. He paused, something shifting in his expression. And there's something I need to give you first. He reached into his coat and withdrew the pendant he'd been carrying, silver star on a delicate chain, gleaming softly in the dim light. The craftsmanship spoke of centuries past. This belonged to someone important long ago, Caspian said quietly. It's blessed with old magic, from before the crown. While you wear this, vampires can't sense you, can't track you, can't compel you. You'll be hidden from everything that makes us what we are. Claire took it carefully. Why give this to me? Because if I fail, if the crown takes me or Dorian claims it or everything goes wrong, I need to know you'll survive, that you can disappear, start over, where they'll never find you. His hand covered hers. Let me do this one thing right. Let me protect you, even if I can't protect myself. Caspian, please. For a moment they stood in flickering light, his hand over hers, both holding on to a small piece of silver that represented hope neither quite believed in. Put it on, he said softly. Claire lifted the chain over her head. The moment the pendant settled against her skin, something changed. Caspian felt it, a sudden absence where her presence had been. Not gone, but veiled. It's working. Even I can barely sense you now. Claire touched the star. Will it protect Owen? No, it only works for the wearer. But if things go badly, you run. You survive. Promise me. She looked at him, this ancient being who'd become important in the span of weeks, who sat alone drinking coffee he couldn't taste, who'd buried a crown because he couldn't bear what it made him, who was walking into danger to save a boy he barely knew. I promise, she said, that I'll do whatever it takes to make sure Owen and I both survive. It wasn't quite what he'd asked, but Caspian understood it was the only promise she could make. Outside, rain continued falling. Somewhere north, in cathedral ruins, a crown waited in darkness. And somewhere in those ruins, a boy counted hours until midnight, unaware his fate hung on choices made centuries before he was born. Caspian collected a few items from the diner, silver, holy water, things that would matter. Claire watched him move with purpose, every gesture economical, and understood she was seeing what he'd kept hidden. Not the monster, not the king. The warrior who'd survived by being very good at what he did. We should go, Caspian said finally. Long drive. We'll need time to prepare. As they moved toward the front, Claire touched the pendant. It felt warm, or maybe that was imagination. A small piece of protection in a world suddenly much larger and more dangerous. The bell chimed as they stepped into rain-soaked night. Behind them, the Nightfall diner glowed warm and safe. Ahead, darkness waited. Claire pulled her jacket tight and followed Caspian into the storm, not knowing if either of them would ever walk back through that door again. The cathedral ruins rose from the mountainside like broken teeth against the night sky. What had once been a place of worship now stood as a monument to abandonment. Stone walls crumbling, roof collapsed in sections, stained glass windows reduced to jagged shards that caught the moonlight like fragments of forgotten prayers. Caspian stood at the edge of the clearing, Claire beside him, both staring at the structure that had guarded his secret for half a century. It's beautiful, Claire whispered. It was more beautiful before, Caspian said quietly, when there were still people who came here to pray. He started forward, Now it's just another grave I've left behind. Inside, moonlight streamed through gaps in the ceiling, and there, in the center of what had once been the nave, surrounded by fallen pews and broken stone, they found Owen. The boy was bound to a pillar, silver chains wrapped around his wrists. His head hung forward, but Caspian could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Alive. "Owen!" Claire started forward, but Caspian caught her arm. "Wait," he said softly. "It's too easy." Figures emerged from the shadows. Aldrich stepped from behind a collapsed wall. Seraphine materialized near the altar, her dark coat blending with the gloom. And from the side chapel, moving with careful deliberation, came a man Caspian hadn't seen in 50 years. Dorian looked exactly as Caspian remembered. Tall, lean, with sharp features and silver-white hair pulled back from his face. He wore a simple black suit and moved with the absolute confidence of someone who knew precisely what they wanted. "Caspian," Dorian said, voice warm, as if they were old friends. 50 years, you haven't changed at all." "Neither have you," Caspian replied, "still dressing like you're attending a funeral." "Perhaps I am." Dorian gestured at the ruins. "The funeral of an age that died when you walked away." His gaze shifted to Claire. "I see you've found a new collection of strays to care about. How long before you abandon her, too?" "Let the boy go, Dorian," Caspian said. "This is between us." "Is it?" Dorian stepped closer. "Because from where I stood for the last 50 years, it seemed like it was between me and the impossible task you left me." Something darker flickered across his face. "Do you remember what you said to me that last day?" Caspian's expression tightened. He remembered. 50 years ago, the throne room empty except for 2 figures. "You're truly leaving?" Dorian had stood before the throne, disbelief warring with anger. "Just like that?" Not just like that. Caspian had removed the crown, held it in shaking hands. "I've killed too many, Dorian, destroyed too much. This thing," he'd looked at the crown with something close to hatred. "It makes monsters of us." "It makes us strong," Dorian had countered. "United. Without it, we're just scattered predators fighting over territory." "Then let them fight." Caspian's voice had been hollow. "Let them choose their own paths. Maybe some will choose better than I did." "And the rest of us? The ones who believed in your vision of order?" Caspian had looked at his oldest friend, his most trusted advisor, and said words he'd regretted every day since. "Find a new way forward." "I can't be your king anymore. I won't." "So you're leaving me to clean up your mess?" Not a question, an accusation. "I'm freeing you from serving a tyrant." Dorian's laugh had been bitter. "You think you're being noble, but you're just running, Caspian, running from responsibility, from consequence, from everything you built." He'd stepped closer. "And when it all falls apart, and it will, I'll be the one standing in the ruins trying to hold together what you were too weak to maintain." Caspian had walked away without another word. He'd buried the crown that night and never looked back. Until now. "I remember," Caspian said quietly, "and you were right. I was running. I was weak. And yet you still won't give me what I need to fix it." Dorian's eyes blazed. "Do you know what it's been like? 30 years of faction wars, vampires killing each other because there was no central authority, humans caught in the crossfire, and I couldn't stop it, not without the crown's power." His voice dropped. "Every death is on your hands, Caspian, every single one." The words hit like physical blows. Caspian felt them land in his chest, confirming fears he'd carried for decades. Claire spoke for the first time. "He's not afraid of power. He's afraid of what it makes him." Dorian's gaze shifted to her. "Then you understand why I need it. Not for myself. For order. For a kingdom that's been bleeding for 50 years. "You're lying," Caspian said softly. "I can hear it in your voice. You want the crown for the same reason I did. Because it fills the empty spaces inside you where certainty used to be." Dorian's expression hardened. "Where is it?" "Beneath the altar, sealed by blood magic. Only I can open the vault." "Then open it." "And if I refuse?" Seraphine moved with inhuman speed, a blade appearing in her hand. She pressed it against Owen's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. "Claire." Owen's voice was hoarse, terrified. "Don't hurt him," Claire said, stepping forward. "Oh, no, please." "He doesn't matter," Seraphine said coldly, "except as leverage." Caspian looked at Owen, saw the fear in the boy's eyes, saw Claire's face, torn between hope and despair. And he thought about all the choices that had led them here. "All right," he said, "I'll open it." He moved to the altar, knelt, pressed his palm against the floor, and spoke words in a dead language. The stone groaned. A section slid aside, revealing darkness and stairs spiraling down. "It's below," Caspian said, "in the crypt." They descended, Caspian, Dorian, Aldrich behind them. The crypt was small, carved from living rock, the air thick with 50 years of stillness. And there, on a stone pedestal in the center, rested the crown. It was simpler than most imagined, just a circlet of dark metal. In the flashlight's beam, it seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. Dorian stopped at the bottom of the stairs, staring with naked hunger. "There it is," Caspian said quietly. "The thing that broke me." He looked at Dorian. "And you think it won't break you?" "I'm not you. I won't let sentiment cloud my judgment." "That's what I thought, too." Caspian moved closer to the crown, but didn't touch it. "Right up until I realized I'd become something I didn't recognize." He turned. "Better feared than forgotten. Is that still what you believe?" "Better than this." Dorian gestured upward. "Better than watching everything crumble." Caspian looked at the crown for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and picked it up. Power flooded through him like ice water in his veins. He could feel them, every vampire for 1,000 miles. Their locations, their thoughts, their wills. The crown settled on his head as if it had never left, and Caspian felt himself start to slip away. "Yes," Dorian breathed, "you're the king again." "No." Caspian's voice echoed with power that made the stone walls shudder. "I'm nothing. This crown doesn't make me a king. It makes me a tyrant." He began to speak, the spell that created the crown, spoken backward. Pain exploded through his skull. The crown burned against his skin, fighting him. It showed him visions, his father's disappointed face, the throne room in its glory, the intoxicating feeling of absolute control, but it also showed him what he'd tried to forget. The 73 dead, the way people had looked at him with fear instead of love, the crushing loneliness of standing at the top. His knees buckled. Blood tears streamed from his eyes. The crown's power was tearing through him, trying to maintain its hold, flooding his mind with 200 years of memories. Every command given, every will broken, every person who'd knelt before him, not in respect, but in terror. "What are you doing?" Dorian's voice came from far away. "Stop! You'll kill yourself." Caspian's body convulsed. The crown was fighting back now, lashing out with psychic force. He could feel it trying to compel him to stop, to submit, to let it remain intact. His hands clawed at his head, trying to remove it, but it held fast. "You are mine," the crown seemed to whisper, in a voice made of ancient malice. "You always have been. You always will be." He was losing. The pain was too great, the crown's will too strong. Then warmth. Claire's hand slipping into his. She'd made it down the stairs somehow, past Aldrich, driven by that quiet courage. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said. "Claire, get back." His voice was barely human, distorted by the crown's power. "No," she said firmly. "You told me the crown feeds on isolation. So I'm here. You're not alone." Her touch was an anchor, small, human, impossibly fragile against the weight of ancient power. But real, so real. The crown shuddered. Caspian understood what Claire had grasped instinctively. The crown's power came from separation, from the wielder standing apart. But if he wasn't alone, if he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to be human, the binding began to unravel. Dorian lunged forward, but Caspian raised one hand, and his will, amplified but directed with precision, froze Dorian in place. "I'm sorry," Caspian said, voice cracking, "for leaving you, for running, for all of it." He continued speaking the reversal, felt the crown fragmenting. "But I won't pass this curse to you. I won't let you become what I was." The crown shattered, not with explosion. It simply broke apart, pieces of ancient metal falling like autumn leaves. With each piece that fell, the power bled away. The connection to every vampire, the ability to command with a thought, the terrible certainty of absolute authority, all of it gone. Caspian collapsed. Claire caught him, or tried. They went down together, surrounded by fragments that were already beginning to rust. "No," Dorian whispered, staring at the pieces with such loss it was painful. "What have you done?" "Freed us," Caspian said weakly. "All of us." They climbed back to the nave. Seraphine still held the blade to Owen's throat, but her expression had changed. She'd felt it, the crown's death. "It's gone," she said quietly. "Let the boy go," Caspian said. "Not a command, a request. Please." For a long moment she didn't move. Then something shifted in her ancient eyes, something like relief or perhaps recognition of an ending long overdue. "I've been bound to service for 300 years, she said softly. "First to Caspian's father, then to him, then waiting for Dorian's command." She lowered the blade. "Perhaps it's time I chose my own path." She cut Owen's chains herself. Claire ran to her brother, pulling him into a tight embrace. Owen was crying, shaking, but alive. Dorian stood near the altar, staring at Caspian with an expression caught between rage and grief. "You've doomed us." "Perhaps," Caspian agreed. "Or perhaps I've finally given us a chance to be something other than monsters." He met Dorian's eyes. "The kingdom is yours if you want it, but build it on something other than fear." He moved toward the entrance, each step heavier than the last. The crown's destruction had taken something from him. He could feel it. Mortality, creeping in at the edges. He had years, maybe, perhaps only months, the price of breaking what should never have been made. Claire started to follow, but Dorian's voice stopped her. "He'll leave you," he said quietly. "It's what he does." Claire looked back at this ancient creature standing in the ruins of his hopes. "That's his choice to make," she said, "and mine to accept." Outside, rain had started again. Caspian stood in the clearing, face turned up to the sky, letting the water wash away the last traces of the crown's touch. Claire and Owen emerged. The boy was shaken, but recovering. "What now?" Claire asked. Caspian looked at her, and for the first time in 270 years, he didn't have an answer planned. "I need to go north," he said finally. "There are remnants of my kingdom, vampires who felt the crown's destruction. They'll be afraid, confused. I owe them an explanation." He paused. "I don't know when I'll be back, or if." He reached into his coat, pulled out a small leather journal. "This has names, places, people who can help if you need it. If anything from my world comes for you, we'll be okay," Claire interrupted gently. He looked at her, memorizing her face in the moonlight. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing me, for staying, for being brave when I couldn't be." Caspian, but he was already moving, walking toward the tree line with that inhuman grace. Claire watched until she couldn't see him anymore, one hand pressed against the pendant. "Is he coming back?" Owen asked quietly. "I don't know," Claire said. 3 months later, the Nightfall Diner opened as it always did. Claire moved through her shift with practiced grace, refilling coffee, taking orders. Booth 3 sat empty. It had been empty every night. Claire tried not to look, tried not to think about the man who used to sit there with his untouched coffee and ancient eyes. But every night, she looked. Near closing, she poured a cup of coffee anyway, set it at the empty booth, let it grow cold. "You waiting for someone?" her manager asked. "Just a regular," Claire said. "He'll come back when he's ready." She touched the pendant beneath her shirt. Sometimes, late at night, she thought she felt warmth from it, as if somewhere far away someone was thinking of her. Or perhaps it was just wishful thinking. The rain started again outside. Claire wiped down the counter, turned off half the lights. And just before she locked up, She looked out the window one last time. In the distance, barely visible through the rain, a figure stood beneath the streetlight. Tall, still, watching. She couldn't make out the features, couldn't be sure. The figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Claire stood there for a long moment, hand against the glass, breath fogging the window. "Good night," she whispered to the empty street. She locked the door, turned off the last light, walked home through the rain. Behind her, booth 3 waited in the darkness. The coffee cup sat cold and untouched on the table. And somewhere in the night, a man who had been a king walked alone through the shadows, carrying the weight of his choices, the memory of a warm hand in his, and the faint, stubborn hope that someday, perhaps, he might find his way back to a small diner where someone kept coffee waiting for a ghost. Some crowns shatter, some kings walk away, and some stories end not with certainty, but with the quiet courage of continuing to hope in the face of an empty booth and an endless night. The rain fell, the city slept, and the question of whether he would return remained, like so many things worth waiting for, beautifully and achingly unanswered.